Hi, hello Tochnyi. Всім добрий вечір в Україні. Um, everyone that's in Ukraine, good evening. Um, yeah, I would like to talk a little bit about Russian war crimes occurring within the Kherson region in the south of Ukraine. First, I'd like to kind of set the geographical kind of scene because I think that's important to the nature of the warfare that you see there. And as you can see, this is an aggregate of all of the drone strikes that have either been geolocated by other members of the basement or the ones without the golden ring around them. Those are not precise geolocations, but geolocated roughly to like a neighborhood per se, um, or potentially to a building, potentially, or a street that come from Kherson ODA and the prosecutor's office, the UA National Police, and sometimes the Ministry of Internal Affairs. They do sometimes report on it, but not as much. Most of our daily casualties that we can see within these um, attacks are presented through the smaller organizations like Kherson Police and the ODA. So we rely on them mostly in terms of coming up with numbers. So what I ended up doing is I started the map back in June, working with Andrew in the basement and some of the other members there. And I kind of took it over as my sole responsibility for a little while. And I began to notice a pattern over time. First off, the thing that caught my attention was an FPV drone being used against a civilian. That wasn't something I had necessarily seen a lot of. As someone that has kind of followed this conflict since its inception, um, I definitely was concerned about the use of kamikaze drones or drone drop grenades on civilians. And you've seen it potentially in like Vovchansk. There's a pretty infamous video of a FPV drone or a drone drop being used against civilians there. But the scale of the use of FPV and drone drop grenades against civilians in Kherson is nothing like anywhere else on the front line from what I've been able to gather from what's publicly available from the police and various like military administration officials. Um, so that's one aspect that kind of drew me into this, and so I started to kind of just by hand kind of take a toll or a tally, to just kind of see where it was at and how big of an issue this really was, because it seemed like it was a really frequent thing that I was mapping and was increasingly concerning with higher casualty counts, more deaths. Um, and then I began to see more of a pattern. I started to see, okay, we have an upward trend here, and that led to this becoming more of a project that I presented to some of the people in the basement and was like, "Hey, I really think that we need to start bringing this information together in some kind of way because it doesn't really seem like anybody else is really talking about it." And to that point, that's not necessarily true. There are some other outlets that are covering this as well. I think it's really important that they get attention as well. Ukrainska Pravda has done a little bit of coverage. Um, DW, Deutsche Welle, they did a pretty in-depth documentary, not on this segment of the front line, but a segment of Kherson to the north in Beroslavsky Rayon. And they did a pretty in-depth investigation there that was incredible. But that came out on August 28th. And it focuses to the north. And I haven't seen anything focus more to the south. So I kind of honed in on this area where I saw more of these casualties happening than anywhere else. It seemed like Beryaslav, you had like 120 casualties over like a 6-month period of time. We're talking twice that in casualty count in a third of the time in this area of the Kherson region. It's pretty incredible when you look at it from a statistical point of view to kind of see exactly how bad this is. Um, so comparing Deutsche Welle's numbers to my own, that's kind of how I was thinking about this in terms of its importance and why it hasn't really received the coverage. I'm not really sure, but that's why I want to do this, is to really bring this to light because as it stands right now, I have some more current numbers than what are presented in the article, but as it stands right now, we're at 199 casualties since June 21st. And this is an updated graphic from a shout out to Chris from Tochyni. He's been
Just one sec. Let me know if you want me to present something in particular, Brandon. So yeah.
no, absolutely. This is perfect. This is perfect.
Okay. Perfect. Good.
With our sort of trend here, you can see this is a graph displaying ages of casualties. But one thing here, this is updated through the end of the month of August. Now, my article on Tochyni ended around August 23rd, and that was the peak of basically the occurrences. We'd had the most in that 7-day period of time leading up to the 23rd that we'd had any other period of time, and it's only gotten worse since. And then that's actually changed a little bit. Erland, if you could show the week to week graphic that I
Yeah.
shared with you earlier,
Absolutely. One sec.
that'd be, yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. And yeah, shout out to Chris from Tochyni, who has done a fantastic job in conveying these statistics, much better than I could with sort of my my functioning knowledge of Google Sheets. Chris has done a fantastic job in bringing this to sort of a really understandable visual presentation here. So this is a week by week breakdown. You can see I didn't really notice anything until we got to like the 16-20, kind of in the mid-July range. That's when I was like, okay, there's something going on here. What is happening? Now, towards the end, we do see a little bit of a fall off here, and I'll get to that in a little bit, as sort of like future implications, and developments that we might have in this front later. So just in terms of how we did the investigation, collecting the casualties there, from our official sources. And what we were going to do now is going to start to cross-reference them with some of the channels. Erland, if you could show, or hover over the Kot Dobrahod video, the first video in the article.
Yeah, I'm not
We
gonna show that because we're probably gonna
abs-
get demonetized
absolutely,
or banned from YouTube. But yeah,
absolutely.
this one, right?
The one above.
The one above. Ah, okay,
But you
sorry.
can head over to Tochyni.info where we aren't
Absolutely.
obligated to censor anything.
Yeah, you can see it on the website, and I'll put the link for the article in the description of the video now.
Much appreciated. Yeah, so Kot Dobrahod put this video out. It was actually in May is when this dates back to. So I had to do a little bit of like tracking back. And after talking with Andrew Perpetua a little bit more, because he's been tracking this since October, November of last year, this is something that's been characteristic of the front since last fall. So it's not that it's necessarily new occurrences. It's just sort of a new pattern in terms of the scale of it all. And this was released in May here. And this is kind of your characteristic drone drop video. Obviously, we're not going to show it, but I can kind of describe a little bit of what happens. In this video in particular, the drone is chasing a man probably in his 40s to 50s, which is pretty typical for the person that is still living in Kherson at this time. You can see that also represented in the age demographic pie chart on Chris's fantastic graphics that he put up there. So you can see that man being chased by the drone. It drops 4 to 5 grenades on him. And one thing that happens that really kind of made me sick when I was doing the investigation is the memification of it. And I think this is really important. It was a question that Mario Andres Niero Torres from Netivision, he interviewed me about the article, and his question was like, how do you know they're doing it for fun? And I thought that was a good question because maybe I didn't convey that quite as well as I wanted to in this. The memification in the video, you can see there's like little jaga jagas that they put in there, which is obviously it's an audio clip and a little like AI sticker of Robert Brovdi from Birds of Magyar. So you can start to see how there's sort of the memification of it, and this man was a civilian target. And that is how the videos more or less manifest. Now we're starting to see things a little bit differently with some other mill bloggers. So if you could, Erland, hover over the next video. This is from a pretty infamous account, Osvedomitel Alex, or um, he's От Mariupola do Karpatia. I think if I'm saying that correctly. But basically from Mariupol to the Carpathians is his sort of telegram name that he goes by. And his account is pretty much dedicated to reposting or posting videos sent to him by other drone pilots in this region of exclusively drone drop attacks against civilians and police and EMS workers, civilian infrastructure. Really popular target is cars. Sometimes it's just vehicles in garages. So, I mean, the civilian segment of these drone attacks is honestly, it's a pretty small segment of all of the drone attacks that are happening in that area. So there's more drone attacks than you can even imagine just based off the civilian casualties, right? Because you're also going against cars and other things. So like you have this array of drone attacks, and this one genre seems to make it onto the Telegram channels more than anything. And it's these civilian drone attacks or these police drone attacks. So in this case, this video shows a drone drop grenade hitting a police officer as he leaves the car. And unfortunately, I think he was a 36-year-old father, and he did not make it. And that's characteristic as well. There's been, I think, about 20 EMS or police casualties over the course of the last 2 months in Kherson Oblast. So there have been specific incidences where cops are being followed. And that's honestly celebrated, as you can see in the caption here. Minus svinya is what it says, right? Like one less pig. So like obviously trying to again make light of the situation in some kind of way. And you can also see that happening in a more recent video, actually. Alex Osvedomitel, he posted a drone drop against a man on a moped. And this attack that I'm referring to offhand, it's not represented in my data set yet. That's going to be represented in an updated article that I'll be publishing probably in the next week or so. And what occurs in that video is Alex Osvedomitel says that this man was going from military unit to military unit on a moped, and on the last time they got him, but nowhere is that shown. Only thing shown is a drone hovering and chasing this man on a moped and then hitting it with a grenade and wounding him. So we can see that there's actually no memification now, and it's just sort of moving more towards if you could say it, almost like a war porn account, where it's becoming more or less like posting for the pleasure of the civilian casualty being incurred. So that's one thing that we've noticed in terms of how they've evolved in terms of how they post about it, how they talk about it, and I think that really underpins a lot of sort of the attitude that goes into the attack in the first place. There was a person that commented under one of my geolocations of that September 4th attack. And they said, well, it's just a person on a moped getting hit. And it's, well, no, actually, the Russians referred to that person as a civilian, and Kherson ODA referred to that person as a civilian. And if it's a civilian casualty, no matter what, it should probably be investigated. And I think that kind of goes into this attitude from Trimasova's documentary with the Russian soldiers there. This sort of idea that distancing themselves from war crimes, and war crimes, I don't see them, they don't happen, or trying to find ways to cover war crimes. We've actually in the basement noticed a pattern in terms of how they're actually using sort of a format in terms of how they're using language to try to convey war crimes in a way that maybe they won't be seen as such. So that's one element that I think is really interesting for the future in terms of what we do for analysis going forward. in terms of some suspects, I think there's a couple people that we can kind of throw out without really necessarily compromising any investigation, because they're very open about what they do. And these are two suspects, actually, the DW, Deutsche Welle, pointed out in their documentary, Bars 33 and the 205th Motor Rifle Brigade, elements of which may no longer be in Kherson, potentially. We may have had a development where some of our drone operators might be now in Kursk. We do have in the basement some information pertaining to that, which I think that makes it interesting. If you take a look at the week-to-week drone casualties, there's a massive drop-off after the 30th. Yeah, thank you, Erland. Something very interesting that I noticed. So some future implications, maybe we might be seeing less, but I will say there's an outlier to this sort of theory. Just today, a minibus in Kherson was attacked with a drone drop grenade, and 6 people were injured, all falling right within that age demographic of 41 to 60 years old, sort of the typical target of Russian drone operators. And actually, the day before, they failed to incur civilian casualties while attacking a bus before that. So I think I'm beginning to notice a pattern now. Whoever is left from that unit, or whatever unit might have moved in to replace them, they're going after buses. So some interesting things to keep in mind. Now, as the investigation goes on, we're going to expand our data. As of right now, I've already begun collecting Kherson proper, Suvorovsky, Korabelny, and Tavrivsky districts in their data, and I'm going to be adding that to the next update. And as well, we're going to be linking our data in the spreadsheet, grabbing from as many Russian Telegram posts as we possibly can to try and link the civilian casualty to an actual video that's been posted. That's going to be very hard, and it has been hard so far, but I'm confident that we can get a few that will really start to open people's eyes to this being a real thing.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brendon. And I want to say that I talked to Andrew about this, and he also wants to emphasize, as far as I understand, the fact that this isn't just happening in Kherson, it's happening in many places. And you know, bringing in an extra focal point to this specific situation is very very helpful, because of course Andrew can't track everything. I mean, he can track a lot, but putting emphasis on a problem like this and a war crime like this, as much as you're doing, is very important.